In prison, Malcolm would spend his money, which Ella would send him, on drugs like marijuana, which was smuggled in by the guards. Malcolm soon, in prison, acquires the nickname Satan for how anti-religious he was. He would constantly curse God and religion. He would be put into solitary often for things like cursing the gods, dropping his food on purpose, and refusing to answer his number. One day, a prisoner, who Malcolm admired for his intelligence, advised him he should start reading. Malcolm, realizing that he was no longer able to write or even spell properly, since he had not done any studying since 8th grade, decided to take his advice. Okay, before I carry on with Malcolm's biography, I would like to emphasize on what kind of person Malcolm was. So you need to understand that up until now, from when he moved to Boston until now, when he was around 23, 24, for around 10 years, Malcolm was on the streets. He was in the ghetto, surrounded by criminals and drug addicts and hustlers whose sole purpose in life was to make money and to con, etc. And so too was Malcolm's whole purpose. He was basically a savage. His vocabulary was full of curses. Up until now, he had no one in his life who had a positive impact or positive impression on him. Up until now, his life was just full of overdosing on drugs and making money and trying to survive. In 1948, when Malcolm was moved to Concord prison, he was invited to join the Nation of Islam. Reginald, Malcolm's younger brother, came to visit him one day and invited him, saying that this is the natural religion of the black man. Reginald explained to him that the white man is the devil. When Malcolm heard this, his mind flashed across the entire spectrum of all the white people he had ever known, not realizing up until now that they thought themselves as superior and the black man inferior. He thought about how they ruined his family, they killed his father, called his mother crazy, the whites who split them up, his white teacher who told him to be a carpenter, his encounters with the white people when he used to shine their shoes, and so on. Reginald would frequent the prison, teaching Malcolm their newly accepted religion. He would teach him that a man named Wallace Ford, who claimed to be God, had given Elijah Muhammad God's message for the black people. After learning so much about Elijah Muhammad, Malcolm decides to write to him, and he realizes that his grammar was poor, couldn't express himself properly in writing as he had a limited vocabulary. So he decided he had to educate himself. So he picked up a dictionary from the prison library and started reading and copying out the dictionary. From then on, Malcolm was a frantic book reader. He would read every day. If he wasn't doing anything else, he would be reading, mainly about history. During this time, Malcolm learned about black slavery, something which was not found in the history textbooks which he studied in school. Studying this opened his eyes to a new perception of the white man and intensified his cause to join Elijah Muhammad. Malcolm soon began spreading the word and the message of Elijah Muhammad to other black inmates. Malcolm also began praying. He also got involved in debating. The prison held debating classes in which they would choose a topic for them to debate about, speaking in front of the class. This is when Malcolm realized that he had a talent in public speaking and a skill which would be a medium by which he changed the world. Malcolm's brother Reginald, the one who taught him about the Nation of Islam, visited Malcolm one day, cursing Elijah Muhammad. He had been banished from the Nation of Islam due to immoral acts which were forbidden. Seeing that his family taken the side of Elijah Muhammad, Reginald felt rejected by his family. He slowly started expressing a mental breakdown, first claiming that he himself was the messenger of God, and then saying that he was God. Eventually, he was put into a mental institution. After 6 long years of imprisonment, and after 6 long years of studying and preaching the word of Elijah Muhammad, Malcolm is released in 1952. But instead of going back to New York or Boston, Malcolm went to Detroit, where he was promised employment by Wilfred's boss to work in a furniture store. Malcolm no longer wanted to associate his life with crime, as he was a changed man now. The first thing Malcolm bought was a watch, a pair of new glasses, and a suitcase. Malcolm, now living with Wilfred and his family, learned the Islamic prayer and would pray regularly. He was a practicing Muslim and would frequent the Nation of Islam temple, temple number 1. There were many other temples in other cities. Malcolm witnessed how the black Muslims acted, the way they treated each other with respect and love, unlike his ghetto life prior to prison. Here he would learn more about his newly accepted religion. Malcolm eventually met Elijah Muhammad and was very excited as this was the man whose preaching had changed his life. Malcolm explained to Elijah Muhammad that the Nation of Islam should start preaching on the streets, since up until now they just sat idle waiting for people to join. And so that's what the members began doing. Malcolm, who spent most of his life on the streets, knew the psychology of the black man on the streets, and so he was good at converting them. This was Malcolm's first major contribution to the cause, in the application of his saying, "It's the hinge that squeaks that gets the grease." Malcolm also at this time received the X in his name, which symbolized the African family name that he never could know. In 1953, Malcolm X became the Assistant Minister of Temple No. 1 and began giving lectures, something which he would become famous for later on, preaching about how the white man looks down upon the black man and does not see him amongst them, about black slavery and how they raped their mothers, and also how the first man was a black man and that the Nation of Islam is the black man's religion. He gave the black people pride in their dark colors and hatred for his light complexion due to the rapist blood. Malcolm X grew very close to Elijah Muhammad. He would visit him often in Chicago, where Elijah lived. He would ask questions about him, about Islam. Elijah Muhammad took Malcolm X under his wing and taught him everything he knew. Seeing the success that Malcolm was bringing, inviting people to the cause, Elijah Muhammad sent Malcolm to Boston as minister. Then he sent him to Philly, where he would preach some more and gain more success, and then to New York as minister, where he got more success. In 1958, Malcolm X got married to a lady named Betty X. November in this same year, Malcolm's first daughter was born, Attila, and then in 1960, another daughter, Hubila, and in 1962, Ilyasa, and in 1964, Amila. Malcolm was always on the move, going from temple to temple, various cities to spread the word of the Nation of Islam. He would give many lectures to the blacks around America, and soon the Nation of Islam was getting media attention. Compared to the other ministers, Malcolm X was doing the most to spread the message. He even made his own newsletter called Muhammad Speaks. The Nation of Islam was also filmed for a TV program which was to be released in 1959, The Hate That Hate Produced. At a time where no one knew what the Nation of Islam was, now everyone was talking about it. Malcolm's preaching for separation stirred up a lot of controversy. Soon he was invited to radio TV shows for debates and discussions. Malcolm now began preaching to the white man, defending the Nation of Islam, explaining that the black wanted integration, not the fake integration, which allows them to just live in America with them, but real integration, which allows the black man respect as human beings. At the same time, he would preach to the black people to stop trying to integrate with the whites and seeking to please them and work for them. Instead, he preached for them to become independent of the white people by building their own businesses and hiring other black people. Also, not to think inferior of themselves. This was how Malcolm would preach separation. Malcolm was also invited to speak for colleges and universities. Malcolm would still visit Elijah Muhammad to tell him about the speeches and lectures he gave to colleges and so on, and Elijah Muhammad would give him approval and express his confidence in him. Malcolm loved Elijah Muhammad so much so that he even said that he would die for him, but Malcolm knew nothing of what Elijah actually thought of Malcolm. Elijah was actually jealous of Malcolm, that although Elijah himself felt that he was not capable of speaking in front of colleges and unis, whereas Malcolm was more than capable. He felt that Malcolm was surpassing him and getting more attention than him. And then, in 1963, Malcolm's opinion of Elijah Muhammad completely changed. Malcolm found out that Elijah was involved in adultery, an act which was forbidden in the teachings of the Nation of Islam, something that he himself preached. Malcolm was devastated on hearing this, because a couple of years ago, Malcolm shunned his own brother for committing such crimes. Malcolm did not associate with his own brother Reginald due to the teaching of Elijah Muhammad. Although Malcolm continued preaching black pride and separation and history, he talked less and less about Elijah Muhammad and the religion. Even so, Malcolm felt indebted to Elijah Muhammad, as he was the one who changed his whole life, so Malcolm remained loyal to him. But later that year, Malcolm was to be silenced by Elijah Muhammad, meaning that he was not permitted to speak to the press or to TV shows, nor to preach for 90 days due to a comment he made about the death of John F. Kennedy. Malcolm eventually found out that Elijah Muhammad was now planning to kill him. Although before he suspected this, it became clear to him when one of the Nation of Islam members were ordered to plant a bomb in Malcolm's car, could not bring himself to do it. Instead, he approached Malcolm, telling him of what he was ordered to do. Malcolm felt betrayed. He could not bring himself around. Why? As he never disobeyed Elijah Muhammad, and he done so much for his cause. And by now, it was definite that Malcolm was no longer a member.